Hi, it's Penny here, and today I just wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about some of the weirdest books that I read in 2021. So I already did a video where I talked about my favorite fantasy and science fiction books that I read last year. So those are my favorite genres, and I was thinking about, are there any other genres that stand out to me? And there wasn't really, but there were a few weird ones that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit more. Now, I do often like really weird books, however, these are probably 50-50 as to whether I like them or not. Definitely there were elements of all of them that I liked, but some of them had some other elements that made me not like them as much as I potentially could have. And let's start with a really good example of that. So we've got Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. This one I would almost say is a classic. A lot of people talk about it as a really amazing book that you should read. And honestly, I don't really agree. This is one where there's some elements that I thought were amazing, but I just couldn't get on board with some of the weird sex stuff and also the animal torture. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons to avoid this book. But let's talk about the weird stuff. So what's happening in this book is we have two main storylines. Part of it is we're following this young boy who is running away from home. He doesn't have a great relationship with his father. And at some point, there's basically a prophecy made that he is going to sleep with his sister and his mother and kill his father. It's like an Oedipus-style prophecy that debatably comes true, although he's experiencing a lot of things through his dreams, so you can definitely question which things are real and which things are not. I have to say, the sexual awakening of a teenage boy is not something I like to read about, especially when some of it is somewhat twisted, but I did find the way that dreams were being incorporated into the story really interesting, and it's definitely very metaphorical and deep, and questioning a lot of things about reality and what makes things real. But I definitely enjoyed the other storyline better. So in this, we're following this old man, but we also get his story when he was a young child, and something weird, I won't say what, but something weird happens to him and his whole group of classmates. And as a result, he kind of struggles with a lot of things, but he also gains the ability to talk to cats. So in the beginning, he's basically doing this job where he tries to track down stray cats by talking to other cats that he finds on the street. And I really loved his conversations with the cats. The cats acted especially cat-like. He kept saying to them, you know, like, it helps me to give you a name when I talk to you, so can I call you such and such? And the cat will be like, I don't really care about human names, so like call me whatever you want to call me. Oh, I've just remembered this horrible part related to this character that happens when he's a child. It's not really him, it's his teacher. There's just this part where she's basically having her period. And I don't think Haruki Murakami knows much about periods. It was weird, it was unnecessary, and unfortunately that's how I feel about a lot of things that happened in this. So the cats, that part leads to basically a whole chapter of you just getting these cats being horribly murdered and detailed description of how that happens, and that was completely unnecessary. I did not want it. Also, further talking about the weirdness in the story, we get Jack Daniels and Colonel Sanders kind of acting as like spiritual guides, but also involved in the horrible cat torture. So again, not my favorite, but I definitely can't say that Kafka on the Shore wasn't really weird, and the weirdness was interesting. It's just it was also quite gross in some bits and just things that I didn't want to read about. I had previously read The Wind-Up Bird Chronicles by Haruki Murakami, and I would say I preferred that much more. There is still in that weird sex stuff, but it's more between like consenting adults who know what's going on. There's also some torture, but that's again humans. I much prefer reading about humans being tortured than cats being tortured. Probably in real life it's better that no one gets tortured, but if I have to read about torture, I don't want it to be a poor defenseless animal. So I personally would really recommend The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle more than I would recommend Kafka on the Shore, even though I know Kafka on the Shore probably has more notoriety. And I've seen some people saying Kafka on the Shore is a really beautiful story, and honestly, no. But it was definitely weird, and that's why it gets on this list. Okay, next we're going to talk about Tomi. I always say Tomi. I've recently seen people saying that it should be Tomie. and I'm annoyed at myself for not continuing my Japanese Duolingo lessons so that I could feel confident about that. So for now, we're probably just going to call it Tomi because that's what I know it is. But I need to do some more research. Anyway, Tomi is about this girl who, when she experiences trauma, she basically breaks apart into multiple versions of herself. Even if she is essentially destroyed, more of her will appear. As well, she's a bit of a succubus, so men always tend to fall in love with her, but then that turns into more violent tendencies when they don't get what they want from her, which of course often leads to her being in situations where she experiences some kind of trauma and things go downhill from there. The way that Junji Ito explores this concept and just keeps taking it to new and weird directions through, I guess, a bunch of short stories, but they are somewhat interrelated. And it's just super weird, super yuck. Quite disturbing, but also kind of interesting. I will say I've also read Uzumaki by Junji Ito, and I do prefer Uzumaki. I feel like that story keeps building on itself throughout the whole book, whereas I feel like with Tomi, about part way, it felt like it peaked and it didn't connect all the stories together as well as Uzumaki did. So I hear a lot more people talking about Tomi than Uzumaki, but again, I would recommend Uzumaki first. But Tomi is really interesting. I feel like if I'd read that first, I probably would have enjoyed it more because I wouldn't have been expecting the same thing that Uzumaki did. But I definitely think this fits into a weirdest books category because just the way that Junji Ito thinks of bringing Tomi back from the dead through different kinds of objects and in different kinds of ways was very creative, but very weird. And I do think if you like weird things, but also being kind of grossed out, then Junji Ito is your man, for sure. Alright, the next one I'm going to talk about, to be honest, is maybe the weirdest of all of these, and that is Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. I didn't write down their name, and it's been a long time since I looked at it. So these are Ukrainian authors, and this is the translation to English. Just sometimes make me wonder whether some things could have been lost in translation, because did the translator really understand the full weirdness that was going on? Because I don't feel like I always understood what was going on. So we start with this young girl who's going on holiday with her mother. Her mother meets this man who then asks her to do some very strange things. And she does them and is rewarded with these coins. And he keeps getting her to do these strange things and rewarding her with these coins. And eventually she finds out that she's earning this place in this special school. And she goes to this school where things are very strange. A lot of the older students have all sorts of weird deformities that seem to be related to their specialties. The classes have them doing things that don't really make a lot of sense. And some of the lessons, you get little excerpts of them, and they're kind of impossible, but also amazing to think about. And also, as the main character does more of these lessons, you start getting some idea of what the school is really for. That said, when I finished this book, I actually had to go back and reread the ending. Then I went and read a whole bunch of different ideas that people had about what the story was actually about, and then I went back and reread it again, and I think now I have an idea of what happened, but it's definitely open for interpretation. It's just one of these books where really weird things are happening, but the way that it's described leading up to those weird things almost makes those weird things seem justifiable, explainable, not weird, but they are weird. And this is actually the first book in a series, and there are more books, but I don't know if any of the other books have been translated. But if they were, I would totally be up for reading them, because that first book just kind of blew my mind with how weird it was. And there were some times when I was like not even sure what was happening, but I was still enjoying the journey. And some of the concepts that were introduced were just amazing concepts to think about. Then next we've got Someone Like Me. So I picked this up secondhand because Emma Cary wrote The Girl with All the Gifts and The Boy on the Bridge, both of which I really enjoyed. Those are more like zombie novels. This one, I feel like it's hard to talk about what's weird about it and what it's even about without spoiling it, because right from the beginning you don't really know what's going on. You've got this woman who has an abusive ex-husband, And during an altercation with him, she has a very weird experience where she doesn't feel like she was in control of herself, and she reacts rather violently, although he definitely deserved a bit of violence, to be honest. But it really makes her question some things about herself. Then she also has a teenage boy and a younger daughter, but that teenage boy makes friends with this other girl, and she has had a lot of mental health issues since some traumatic event that happened in her childhood. And as a result, she also has a lot of questions about reality and her perception of it. And one of the things she does to cope with it is she has this imaginary friend that's, I forget what animal it was. But anyway, she talks to this imaginary friend. I think you even get some perspective chapters from the imaginary friend's point of view. And this one definitely twists reality somewhat. You're never really sure if what your characters are telling you is actual reality or just how they're perceiving reality. And even I feel like once you get to the end of the book, that's not necessarily entirely clear. But I think you draw certain conclusions about what's going on. At the end, it was really action-packed, but just the general idea of what's going on in this book, as you discover what it is that's happening, is really weird, but I loved it. And this is definitely one that's on my I will reread it at some point list. Then lastly, we've got one that I've talked about quite a lot, and that is Amatka by Karen Tidbeck. This one is weird just on so many levels. It gets very surreal at the end. But primarily we're following this girl who is a hygiene product researcher, and she's going from one colony to another to find out about this other colony's hygiene needs. But as well, they live kind of in this dystopian world where you have to regularly either tell things their names or write names on things so that those things will hold their form. Otherwise, they turn into kind of like this horrible gunky stuff. And because she's also suffering from a lot of grief, she often forgets to name things with not very good consequences, and people are kind of like, what's wrong with this girl? Why can't she just remember to name things? It's very important. There's a lot of secrets also going on with this colony and about what's happening with the fact that things can't hold their shape when they don't have their names. And also, weirdly, I think the part of this that really made me the most emotional is the parts about these poor mushroom harvesters that suffer from a lot of eczema, and the way that they're suffering was explained just felt so real and relatable to me, and I loved it. And at the end, things got very surreal. I think when you know that you're in a world where things have to be named in order to hold their shape, you know that the ending is probably going to depart from reality quite significantly. And I really loved it. Super weird, but I loved it. So, those are the weirdest books that I read last year. Let me know what weird books you've read recently, because I would love to have some more weird books to read. Otherwise, I hope that you're doing well, and I will see you next time.